development and why sustainable development. Of course, in the previous lecture, I discussed the need for sustainable development, but again, I am repeating those things, or some more concepts will be added. See, if you look at the evolution of the debates on the growth and development, this has followed the following path. In the beginning, there used to be a lot of emphasis given on the concept growth. Now, when you say growth, you refer to the GDP growth, like I discussed only a few hours ago. And then in growth, you talk about the GDP growth, you do not worry much about the distribution. And say, for example, if you are producing 100 rupees GDP in India, then this GDP could be produced by two people, say Mr. X and Mr. Y, and say Mr. Y has say earned 1 crore income in a year, and okay, Mr. X has 1 crore income and Mr. Y has say 100 rupees income in the same year. Now, if you look at the per capita income of the country, then that will be how much? 1 crore plus 100 divided by 2. So that is equal to 50 lakh 100 rupees per capita income. Now, Mr. X has earned 1 crore, but Mr. Y has earned 100 rupees. But when you conclude for the lesson that the per capita income of India, where Mr. X and Y reside, is 50 lakh 100 rupees, and you go and ask Mr. Y that you have 50 lakh and 100 rupees, why don't you give me 25 lakh? Then he will ask, what is 25 lakh? I have never seen lakh, for example, 25 lakh. So that is a problem with the growth concept, and where we are only looking at the GDP and we emphasize on the per capita income. Then people thought that, okay, so growth is not good, we should have development. Now, what is development? So when you say development, we look beyond GDP and beyond per capita income. So the first thing that comes in development is growth plus distribution. That whatever income you are generating, that should be distributed equally among the people, or at least not 100% equally, but at least everyone should get the benefit of the growth. Along with that, in development, we also talk about the human capital, where we talk about, say, health of the people, education of the people. That is why we are having human development indicator, okay, HDI, where basically we take the per capita income, we take the literacy rate, we take the life expectancy of the people. And remember, life expectancy of the people includes so many other factors. It includes nutrition indirectly, because if people have good nutritional security, then the health outcome will be better, so that there will be better life expectancy numbers. So, so from growth we move towards development, and then people said that no, that is not sufficient. We should have proper valuation of the resources. That means growth and development is again still human oriented. We do not worry about the resources that we are consuming, and that's why we should take into account, we should factor in the resources in our GDP. So for example, I was telling you that no, we do not take into consideration all the non-monetary values in our national income accounting process. That is why there should be proper valuation of the resources. And then comes the concept of sustainable development. Now, what is sustainable development? We are going to discuss in details in this lecture. Now, when you say sustainable development, it is a very broad concept, because the growth and development only focused on the economy component, and economy is a subset of the society, and society is a subset of the environment. So environment is the larger set, or universal set you can say, and in which the society and economy basically interacts. And so economy should not only focus on the humans, or the humans should not focus only on the economy, which is a very narrow aspect, because if there are disturbances in the society and environment, then the economy will be badly affected. That is why we should worry about the economy along with society and the environment. So that is basically the idea of sustainable development, which considers economy, society, and environment at a time. Then comes that again the same thing that we are putting it in a Venn diagram, that when we talk about sustainable development, these are the interactions of all these three factors. If you are considering any two, then that is not sustainable development. Look at this diagram. If it is, if you are considering only economy and environment, then we are talking about the environmental viability of the growth. Similarly, if you are talking about the society and the environment, then whether it is bearable, whether the environment can bear the society. Similarly, if you are talking about society and the economy, then it is talking about the equitable growth, whether every section of the society is getting benefit out of the society, out of the growth. So it is equitable growth. But if you consider all things together, that is society, environment, and economy, then only it is called as sustainable development. And so the idea of sustainable development, no, we can in fact go back in the history, say, in fact, in the Vedic tradition also people talk about different times where we talk about the minimum consumption and not disturbing the environment and the other living beings, respecting and worshipping the mother nature. All those ideas were, they are in Vedic principles. In fact, if you look at the Buddhism also, they talk, in Jainism also, they talk about again, minimum desire, minimum consumption, and then even in Jainism they go extreme, not killing anybody, no living beings should be killed. That's why Jain people used to sleep early. So this, there are a spiritual tradition to this idea of sustainable development, but the idea takes a formal shape. Say Gandhi also talks about this, concept of trusteeship, that this planet has been given to us, but the planet is not ours. So we are only the trustees of this planet. We have to hand over the planet to our next generation the way it was given to us, or at least better than that, not worse than that. Okay? So suppose you have got, say, 100 tons of iron ore as a trustee, or say when we were young or when we were born, we had inherited, say, blue sky, pure water bodies. Similarly, soil, everywhere there was rich soil, rich biodiversity. When we die and when we leave the planet for our next generation, we should not give less of these resources to our grandchildren or our next generation. They should get at least that was given to us. So that's what Gandhi talks about, the trusteeship even on the planet Earth. So Gandhi says that Mother Nature has enough for everyone's need, but for no one's greed. That I have discussed only some time ago. So in this context, at international level, this concern was raised. Just like in 1972, I discussed that the Club of Rome report came, that is Limits to Growth report came. That time at world level also, a concern was raised on the path of development that all the countries are following. And that was discussed in United Nations General Assembly in 1982, that the growth path that the countries are following is not sustainable. And we need to do something at international level. We need to do some intervention. And that's how in the United Nations General Assembly, it was discussed that we should set up a committee which will work on basically the idea of which will analyze the present growth path, and they should recommend something how to adopt this. They should recommend the path that the world should follow to attain a sustainable development path. And that's how the commission that was appointed is known as Brundtland Commission. And why the Brundtland Commission? Because the president, the Prime Minister of Norway, was basically Gro Harlem Brundtland, and he basically chaired the committee, and that committee is known. That commission's name is World Commission on Environment and Development. World Commission on Environment and Development. That was the committee appointed by the United Nations General Assembly, and since the chairperson was Gro Harlem Brundtland, that's how the commission is known as Brundtland Commission. And the report that they produced in 1987 is titled as Our Common Future. I think all of us should read this, report, Our Common Future. Just like I gave you the other report that is Limits to Growth. You should also read this report, Our Common Future. This is a very interesting report. You should read the preface and then the entire report. It's very interesting, Just like you read novels, and as a concerned citizen, we all should read these important documents in our life. We read novels, but these are equally interesting reports. So in this report, they defined the concept sustainable development, and the definition that is used everywhere. Basically, whenever we use the word sustainable development, we use this definition. That is given by the report Our Common Future, or you can say Brundtland Commission, or you can say the World Commission on Environment and Development. And so the definition is the development that meets the need of the present without compromising the ability of the future generation to meet their own needs. This is the definition of the sustainable development. And this is given by the Brundtland Commission, or the World Commission on Environment and Development, or the Our Common Future report. So what is the meaning of this? That we shall discuss in details. So this Brundtland Commission report was basically, they were asked to look at this, a global agenda for the change. Okay? And these are the basically terms of reference. Whenever a commission is appointed, they are given a terms of reference. So they were given these terms for reference, a global agenda for change. The growth path that the world was following is not appropriate, so there is a need for a change. And it was an urgent call by the General Assembly, I told, and then so they were asked to look beyond 2000 and suggest a sustainable development path, and that's how the report came up. And so Brundtland Commission basically had given some important points that were discussed. It has different chapters. They have discussed different issues, but I am focusing only on the important indicators. So they concluded that the poverty is the worst polluter. That was the key argument they provided. When I say poverty is the worst polluter, what is the meaning of this? People will believe that the poor people pollute the most. That is not true. They believe that if your per capita income is low, then you will not be able to afford a clean technology. So developing countries will not be able to adopt clean technology. That is why poverty will be the worst polluter. In that sense only it has been used. So it's not that the poor people pollute the most. So because people can misinterpret this. Why I'm saying this, in fact, in the past also there was a notion that the poor people pollute the most. Why? In fact, the argument was that, say, when you are poor, you are not able to use clean energy, and you are using kerosene. Say for lighting, you are using kerosene. Similarly, you are using biofuel. Basically, not biofuel. You can say firewood or fuel wood. That is actually polluting the most, and they suffer from the indoor pollution. So in that context only, it is said that poverty will be a cause and also an effect of the highest amount of pollution. And then this report said that when we talk about sustainable development, the sustainable development emphasizes upon two types of equity. One is intrageneration equity, and other is intergeneration equity. So when I say intergeneration equity, that means in our present generation, everybody should get equal chance to grow. Okay, and so everyone should get an equal opportunity basically to grow, or everyone should benefit from this growth path. That is intergeneration equity. And intergeneration equity, whatever we are enjoying, our grandchildren should also enjoy. Just like if you watch the old Bollywood movies, I always give this example in my class that when there used to be song that Nili Nili Ambar Par Chand Jab Aaye, but now if you ask any poet to write a poem in Delhi, then they cannot write Nili Nili Ambar because in Delhi they can't even visualize, Nili Nili Ambar or the blue sky. They can't visualize, so they have to write probably something else. Because if you ask a child in Delhi what is the color of sky, they will say it is gray. It is not blue, but that is not true. Okay? So when you say intergenerational equity, if we have enjoyed a blue sky and a clean water body and pristine forest, then we should leave this kind of planet to our next generation. And then the well-being should be non-decreasing. That is non-decreasing well-being across generation. And since you are all mostly science students, you will be interested in a functional form that our well-being is a function of the resources. And resources are of two types. One is a natural resource, other is human-made resource. So broadly, it is a simplistic classification of all the resources. Either nature has made it or humans have made it. So our well-being depends upon these both resources. And if anything actually is reducing, then that would affect our well-being. Okay? But now some people argue that what if these resources are substitutable? That means, okay, natural resources are depleting. That's how we are raising the concern. But what if we all become scientists and we come up with innovative solutions, and we say that no, it doesn't matter even if the natural resources do not exist, no, we can create some substitutes. Okay? And say for example, now you will say that no, even if there are no bees or butterflies, no, we'll spray hormones to increase our food production, and doesn't matter. Similarly, you'll say no, you don't worry about a nice forest and tiger inside the forest. We'll clear the forest for our mining projects, and if you are very romantic, you are very much romantic about the tigers, we'll keep them in zoo. And there are biological scientists who can help in crossbreeding and breeding of the tigers. So we'll have hundreds, thousands, lakhs of tigers. But why you are worrying about the tigers in the forest only? Because this is kind of an argument people can provide. So everything is substitutable. That's what people will argue. Now, based on this idea of substitutability, the idea of sustainable development is seen in two categories. One is strong sustainability and other is weak sustainability. Now, when I say strong sustainability, we say that resources are not perfect substitutes. So, for example, some people will argue that, oh, you are worrying about diamond. Diamond, no, you don't worry about natural diamond. We will get synthetic diamond. Similarly, some people will say that, we are worried about gold. We'll get a substitute for the gold. Say for iron ore, why you are worrying about iron ore? We'll get a substitute for iron ore. So for everything there is substitute. Okay, and that is the argument of weak sustainability. But in strong sustainability, people argue that no, resources are not perfect substitutes. We value every resources independently, and every resource has its own importance. And the people who believe in strong sustainability, they believe that every resource has a meaning. Okay? And when the nature has made this resource, it might have definitely some use, which we do not know. Our knowledge is definitely much more limited. Our ignorance is very high, and knowledge is very limited. So we always argue that no, this resource doesn't have any use, so you can clear this forest and allow the mining company to extract. Or no, you cut this tree, come up with a new building, and so you don't value the tree. But we never know actually what is how the tree or how that ecosystem contributes the planet. Our knowledge is very, very limited. Even if there are so many scientists who are doing a lot of research, our knowledge is very, very limited. Our ignorance is very high. So every natural resource is unique. That is the argument of strong sustainability. And weak sustainability, people argue that all resources are perfectly substitute. Like I gave the example, if there are no tigers in the forest, we will breed them in zoo, and we will have enough tigers. So it doesn't matter where they are. And if there are no iron ores, we will have some substitute. If there are no coals, we will have some other fuel. We will have nuclear. If there is no nuclear, we will have solar. If there is no solar, we will have some other source. So So that's how people are arguing that no, everything is substitutable. So this basically depends upon the ideological position, that is, put in two categories: strong and weak sustainability approach. Now this can be shown in a diagram form. That no, I had told you that no, your welfare or well-being depends upon two types of resources. One is human-made resources, other is natural resources. And so strong sustainability people believe that natural resource stocks should remain constant over time. In x-axis, you are taking time over time period. The resource stock, natural resource stocks should not decrease at all for the future generations. So that will ensure intergeneration equity. And human-made resource, that should also remain stock. If it increases, that is well and good, because that can be created by the humans. But the emphasis is given on the natural resources, and the stock should not decrease over time. That is strong sustainability. But the weak sustainability people argue that no, these are substitutable. Even if the natural resource stock depletes over time, that can be substituted by the human-made resources. So you don't have to worry about any natural resources, and we can manage with the human-made resources. That is the idea of weak sustainability. Now again, there are different economists who have given different ideas, like how to measure the strong sustainability, how to measure the weak sustainability, and but some operational principles, are given by Herman Daly, which are basically widely discussed. And these are the recommendations given by Herman Daly. He says that to achieve sustainable development, we should first control the population. Many people believe that no, population is the main cause behind this unsustainability. Because you see, on this planet, if you look at any other population, when I say it's not only the human population I'm talking about, if you look at the other living being and their population, then their population has always declined. Only the human population has increased. So that's why there is a lot of imbalance on the planet Earth. We have destroyed the nature, we have destroyed the ecosystem balance, and since the problem is coming from the population, we should control the population. And then rate of use of the renewable resources should be less than the rate of the regeneration. Say in case of renewable resources like fish, forest, nobody is denying you to use those resources, but use at a rate which is less than the regeneration capacity. So every year fish stock will increase by a certain amount. So if you are eating fish, eat only that rate, at which the fish population is growing, so that you are not affecting the stock of the fish. Just like I gave you example in the other class that now some fishes have completely vanished from the sea because we have used mechanized trawler, and then so that basically deep bed seabed fishing catches all small big all fishes, and that's how that actually affects the fish population, fish stock, and that vanishes completely from the sea. So if at a similar forest, you can cut the forest to a limit so that forest gets a chance to regenerate itself. But if you go on cutting the trees, then you will find trees do not exist in the forest. You will have only the barren lands. In case of exhaustible resources, the suggestion is coming that we should use exhaustible resources only if we have a substitute. If you do not have a substitute, we have no right to use, because Gandhi has said that we are all trustees to the resources that we have inherited, and we have to give our planet to our next generation as it was given to us, or in a better state, not in a worse state. Then if at all you are using exhaustible resources, then all the rent that you are generating, or means all the profits that you are getting from the exhaustible resources, should be used for the formation of the human capital, so that you can come up with substitutes. If you basically invest in the science and technology, they can come up with different substitutes. That means all the profits that come from the mining industry or exhaustible resources should be invested properly to form human capital. When I say form human capital, invest in health, invest in education. That includes higher education and a lot of research, R&D. And then our pollution emissions should be less than the assimilation capacity. So nature has some assimilation capacity. There are trees that can absorb the carbon dioxide. So Similarly, all our water bodies can assimilate some amount of garbage that we throw. But nature always tells this, that whatever I have produced, I can process. Whatever you have produced, I cannot process it. You have to process it. Just like if anything is biodegradable, then it is nature has produced. You can throw any vegetable, you can throw any organic thing on the planet, then it will be quickly assimilated by the nature. But if we throw plastic, nature cannot process it because nature did not produce this. So that is nature's message to all of us that whatever I have produced, I can process. Whatever you have produced, you have processed. So you should not throw our garbage on the nature because nature did not produce and nature cannot process it. So that's why similarly the pollution up to a limit nature can process, but beyond a limit it cannot process and the situation will become like daily. But if it is little bit pollution, then it can process. So that is the context, and then to attain the sustainable development goals, sustainable development path, from time to time at international level we have discussed things, and then in that context only this Millennium Development Goals came, and we kept a target that by 2015 we have to fulfill 8 goals. If you probably remember this MDG, in which you had 8 goals. And of course, if you do an independent evaluation, countries could not really fulfill those targets. All 8 targets were not fulfilled. But definitely the countries had to work in this line, and many policies were aligned towards this. So we did some improvement, but many countries could not fulfill the targets. But this was basically in the context of the sustainable development, and which ensures both intrageneration equity as well as intergeneration equity. And then came the sustainable development goals. After 2015, we again realized that now we have to have more goals, and then now we have 17 goals in SDG. Again, this also aims to basically have intrageneration equity as well as intergeneration equity, which includes both environment, fishery, atmosphere, and the poverty alleviation, education, then gender inequality. All these things are included in SDG, and countries are trying to achieve these targets by 2030. We have to see actually whether we can really achieve or not. And you will also observe that countries give emphasis only to a few indicators, and many other indicators are compromised. Okay? But basically, our noble goal is that we should achieve a sustainable development path. But we should again think, this sustainable development is for whom? Is it only for the human beings? What about the other living beings? Are we worried about them? Because in both MDG and SDG, if you see, of course, we have mentioned, say, this life on the land, life below water, all these things are mentioned, but then these are all basically giving emphasis on the humans, because we worry about the life on land because otherwise human population will be affected. We worry about the life below water, otherwise human population will be affected. So SDG and MDG, they are actually oriented towards human beings only. But what about the other living beings? We should worry about other living beings, and that is why another Earth Charter 2018 has evolved, and they basically talk about embrace a sustainable lifestyle. And in this Earth Charter 2018, they talk about basically 4 important indicators, and they talk about that respect and care for the community life. Okay? In fact, when you say community life, now people are giving very innovative solutions. That now we all are cooking individually, so it takes away a lot of your energy and time. See, every person, at least one person or 2 people in the family are full time spending for cooking, and we are using so much of energy. Now, what if one entire village cooks at one place, so that on rotation basis you can cook and you can save a lot of time. Okay? Now every day every person in family is spending time on cooking, but if you do a community thing, then you will not have to cook every day. Similarly in cities also, now suppose you are living in apartments, Now we can have that model that we have a community kitchen in the entire apartment. So we can appoint say 10 people who will cook food for everyone, and we pay there. So you don't have to appoint a maid cook for your home. So if you are nowadays in apartment, some 700, 800 people families are living. Now for 700 families, you'll find at least 100 cooks, because they'll be cooking at multiple houses. So at least 100 people would do it. But if you go for community life, only 10 people can cook food for the entire community, and that saves a lot of energy, that saves a lot of time, and so we will be in a better off situation. So that is one part, that is community life. Nowadays we are becoming all individualistic. Say carpool, we are talking about, instead of going alone in a car, use the resource in the optimum size. Then comes ecological integrity. So we should worry about all the ecological interactions, not only human beings or only a few environmental sources. You have to look at the entire ecological system in an integrated approach. And then social and economic justice. In India, we have a lot of shortcomings in this. See, after independence, we have got political justice, or even I don't know actually whether we have got political right equal, right? But if you look at the social and economic justice, even these are written in the constitution. We have not been able to fulfill these objectives. There are some section of the society who are discriminated, and similarly economic people are not getting equal economic opportunities. So that is injustice. So this half chapter is saying that everyone should be given equal social and economic justice. And then democracy, non-violence and peace are the fundamental values that should be followed by everyone whenever we take any policy measures. We have to follow non-violent approach and peace, and then we should believe in the democratic values. So when we say sustainable development, it goes beyond the dimensions that was discussed in the Harlem-Brundtland Commission report. Because that only talked about intergenerational inequity, and that was only focusing on the human population. But at present, now people are saying that sustainable development goes beyond the humans, and it should talk about the ecological dimension, the cultural dimension, spiritual, social, political, ethical, aesthetic, scientific, technological, and economic. So it's a very broad concept. No, we only started with social, economic, and environment, but it goes beyond actually those three dimensions, and it goes beyond the human population. So when we say sustainable development, we have to become more sensitive towards many dimensions. Then only we can achieve the sustainable development. But are we on the track? If you judge whether the growth path that we are following is leading us towards sustainable development, probably we will believe that we only talk much. Our action is far less than the words. Okay, so that's how we have to work on this, and that's what has been, this concern has been raised in the Club of Rome's report, or the Limits to Growth report in 2002, and so it is now time for the action. Now we have given a lot of bhashan over a long time. So all the countries and all the communities need to work on this sustainable development, changing their lifestyle, changing the mode of industrial production. We have to rethink whether this large-scale industrial production is really good for the environment. We have to think whether this export and import to different countries is environmentally sustainable, because in the export and import, we only look at the cost of production, price, at what price we are importing the product. But what about the environmental cost? When we are transporting one commodity from India to America, how much energy is used, and how much pollution we have generated, how much labor we have retrenched, how much employment has been affected in this country or in the destination country. So we have to worry about everything, because employment is very much important to ensure equal distribution of the income. Similarly, to transport, if you only look at the cost of production or the price, then if you are not looking at the environmental cost, then that is not reflecting the true price or the true cost of the product. So overall, we have to change the production structure and the economic structure, And these are very ambitious things, but if you do not act upon it, then like the Club of Rome has warned, similarly in the IPCC report, if you see, they have also warned us that if you do not change the production and carbon emission, then we are only inviting a doomsday very soon, because the intensity of the natural calamities and prevalence of the disease like COVID-19 or many other diseases will only grow in the future, because we have destroyed the ecosystem which can absorb all these things. But so now we do not have time, we need to act upon all these things. So with this I conclude the discussion on sustainable development.